Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering One Piece, episodes 299 and 300, ladies and gentlemen, 300. In this episode, we get more fighting, and we get to see Luffy turn himself into a hot water bottle again, but I still have not been given an explanation as to why. And I'm dying now. I want it. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Bernadette for commissioning this episode. What's up, Bernadette? How are you? This episode, this pair of episodes were very, very fight heavy, and I have no problem with that at all. The only issue that I take currently with where we're at, and I think probably most of you guys can predict this, is the fact that we still don't know what's going on with Chopper. I just want to go back to Chopper. I just want to see Chopper. I just want to be reassured that Chopper's okay. I know that he is. I know we saw him return to size, and I know that he's like being carried in the but we aren't spending enough time with him. And I have grown worried about him because of his transformation. And I can know that he's physically okay and still really need the reassurance that he is emotionally okay. So that's just going to be distracting me all the time. And I just wanted to touch base on that and let you guys know where I'm at. Because every time we get a new episode, I am just waiting for him and his little voice, and I haven't gotten it, and it's just, you know, this is what I'm here for. Let's be honest. We want Chopper. We want Chopper. I'm going to start a chant. So, anyway, I just wanted to mention that right away because I need to know that that nobody holds anything against him, and I need him to be aware of that because I feel like Chopper's going to wake up and he's going to be like, I won't understand if you don't want to be friends with me anymore. And just like really be hard on himself, you know, because that feels like the kind of dude he is. And I don't want that for him. So let's go back. Sanji has dealt with, the wolf guy that he was fighting, right? And so we see just a moment of him sort of breathing hard as he's looking up the stairs because the fight with Zorro and the giraffe, Kaku, is going off up there. And it is raining down quite a bit of shrapnel on his head, basically. I guess it's not called shrapnel unless it's being really launched. This would be rubble, I suppose, would be it. I do really appreciate that the sign for the Gates of Justice that has been like painted on the wall. It's fine that it's Sanji, but all I could think was if this were Zorro, would he actually follow these arrows? Because we know how bad he is at directions. And I just feel like Zorro, how would this go? Zorro would either misinterpret these arrows and be like, this is a trap, and he wouldn't go that way because he would be trying to outsmart somebody thinking that it's a trap, or he would follow them and then he would get distracted by something and head a different way and forget his objective and then realize all of a sudden I'm standing in a hallway with no arrows painted on the walls anymore, and now what do I do? So that's my prediction on what would happen with him. But I was just thinking about it because this is just such a direct follow this area, you know, these arrows. And I was like, what would somebody who we know is notoriously terrible at this, what would they do? But yeah, he is struggling, you know, with what to do because he kind of wants to go up and help Zorro, but he has the key and he wants to help Robin. And finally is just like, all right, I've got to go to her and help her out. That's the priority here. And we cut then to Spandam and Robin, and they're up on the Bridge of Hesitation, which I just can't get over what a bad name that is. It's just so terrible. But he's still got Robin by the hair. And I am going to kind of just talk about what's going on with Spandam and Robin as a group here. Because I'll be honest with you guys, they need to have done slightly more with these two. I think the only reason that this works at all at this point is because they're spending so little time with the two of them. We really only get very occasional check-ins, and it's just meant to sort of up the ante and the tension and remind us how close they are to getting to the actual gates of justice. And otherwise, I feel like either the show writers or Oda realized it's sort of a bummer and sort of boring, so let's not do too much of this. But every time we check in with them, it's just Robin being upset and crying and getting her hair yanked on while Spandam laughs and mocks her and calls her a bitch, which I will say, I was under the impression for a little while in these episodes, because I couldn't remember how it went with previous episodes, but he calls her a bitch in the sub, like, at least, between the two of these episodes, at least 10 times. At least. But in the dub, he doesn't. He keeps saying, damn it. And I think that it's supposed to be kind of a stand-in for a bitch being like too harsh of a swear. And damn it is swear-ish, but it's not as bad. So they go with damn it instead of bitch mostly. But then in the second of these two, he does call her a bitch one time. And it's a pretty, like, big moment when she, like, breaks off and runs away from him and he just yells, you bitch. And I was surprised that they even kept that in, because I sort of just thought they were going to pull away from it. And not to say that I have any particular problem with it. It's just, like, I think probably the language that we've gotten in this, it has been mostly, like, I have been surprised at times with use of bastard, or I think that there has been a son of a bitch a few times. It's not a real frequent thing, but the use of bitch over and over and over again here has been kind of surprising, because they don't really go that hard on it usually. And I am confident that this is a character thing, that this is supposed to be specifically Spandam, not just like I'm doing the swears for the shock value, but Spandam is clearly like a misogynist, right? Like, he's just really quite a piece of shit. And there's something that feels very sexual about the way that he goes in and attacks her and stands on her face. Like, there's just a humiliation element that I feel like if this were for a slightly more adult audience, we would be getting things that were a lot less appropriate. And I feel like he's sort of dancing around that to keep it, like, friendly enough. But the bitch is meant to take it up to that edge where you're really feeling like this guy is a different kind of villain than the ones we've seen so far. Everybody else that we've run into, they felt like a villain in a much more, like, PG sort of way. You know, they're like, oh yeah, I want to kill you. Yeah, I'm going to kill your friends. I'm going to take all this gold and I'm going to kill you. I'm going to steal your ship and I'm going to kill you. Whatever. There's just an element here with him that feels a little bit different and a little bit creepier and grimier and sleazier. So I just wanted to acknowledge that, because I have, mentioned that a few times, but this was the first time that I really sort of put together the fact that the use of the word bitch repeatedly was kind of like accentuating that feeling for me. But like I said, it's just a bummer to be with these two, because every time we're with them, Robin is like kind of trying not to have a breakdown, and Spandam is just grinding her into the dirt and laughing and delighted, and it's not fun to watch, so I'm glad that we aren't with them too often. Gus says, translating swear words from the Japanese to English, either in the subtitles or the dub, doesn't really work. There are less swear words in Japanese, but they're used more commonly and in more contexts. Okay, interesting. So the end of the two of them together, because it's a lot of him just like showing her the gates of justice and talking about how her life is going to be over once she crosses it, you know, whatever, the grandstanding. We've heard this all before. Honestly, I've said the only reason this works at all is because we don't spend that much time with them. We could stand to spend less time with them. I think would be fine. But eventually we do get her trying to run, and he grabs her by the hair and stops her. But she finally yanks herself away hard enough that he's just holding on to clumps of hair, and she's still running. And I thought she might actually like get some distance away, but he catches up with her pretty quick, and he like smashes her into the ground. And I wasn't really sure. Like there's, like I said before, he's got his foot planted on her face and is like smushing her face into the ground from the side. But then at one point when he gets her, she has landed like face first on the very edge of this bridge, and he's trying to yank her back and can't figure out how she's holding on. And it turns out she's biting the edge of the bridge and like holding on with her teeth. And I've never seen American History X, but I will say that the bite the curb scene is pretty well known, I think, amongst a lot of people, just in terms of the pop culture, the zeitgeist. It was sort of in the air as a really particularly brutal scene that a lot of people heard about without ever having seen the movie. And I still see when people... I'm in a lot of like Facebook communities and Twitter communities where people will ask stuff like, what is a scene in a movie that is still as disturbing today as it was the day that it was made? And Bite the Curb gets cited a ton. And that was all I could think of with this moment with her. I was waiting for him to stomp on the back of her head. I was freaking out a little bit, and I knew that's not what was going to happen, because of course it's not. But it was just like this, her teeth wrapped around the edge of the bridge. It's just like the imagery, you know? However, what I did like about this is the fact that she is clinging on so hard because she has decided that she really does want to live. She is fucking trying. And she even at one point is thinking, rescue me. And there was something about, like, it's one thing to say, I want to live. But for some reason, her turning the corner and saying, please rescue me, that held more power than I want to live, even. Because it's like a complete abdication of her pride. You know? Saying you want to live, like, sure. But some folks will still draw a line that they won't cross in order to stay alive. And she clearly was afraid to like put her friends in danger, which I respect, that she didn't want them to put themselves out like that. But now that they're in it, she's not trying to pretend. They could just turn around and leave, you know? She's like, y'all are here anyway. So yeah, please rescue me. And I was like, yeah, thank you. Yes. It was something about her really like kind of giving in at that moment in that respect that felt like a big deal. So that's pretty much the wrap on what's going on with her and Spandam in these two episodes. Cause like I said, there's not a whole lot except for him like taunting her. So the scenes though go on so long, like him stomping on her face, you guys, it's a lot. It goes on for a few minutes. So we go from them to Frankie, and we have a really brief check-in after we like see that Frankie is running down this hallway to the buster call and all of the ships who are like beginning to pull up and get in formation. This whole thing with them is like, I wish that we had a little bit more of a map of how far they are from the island itself. The fact that they're getting into formation, I think, means that they're like right there now, that they've basically arrived, but I don't know that for sure. It just feels like it wouldn't make sense for them to be bothering with getting into formation unless they were practically here. And we jump back, and Luffy jumps out of nowhere and basically like kind of attacks Frankie. And I really did appreciate Frankie being like, dude, why do you have to still be so aggressive? In the dub, he says, man, what's your problem? Don't you get it? We're bros now. I loved it. I really did. I loved it. But then he turns and he sees Lucci. And he says, is Lucci giving you a hard time? And can I give you a hand? And I'm thinking to myself, I'm not mad at Luffy getting help. But the way that Frankie said it, is he giving you a hard time? The way that like a boyfriend would say to a dude at a bar in regard to his girlfriend. I really was like, Frankie, I don't feel like you know what this guy is actually. And Luffy tells him, leave him to me. You should go help Robin. And if you get past him and get to the gates, she's already been taken through and I'll hold him here. But Frankie really seems to still think, oh, no problem. Like basically on my way, I'll take care of Lucci. And he gets a bit of a surprise because Lucci initiates Iron Body. And when Frankie punches him, Lucci has like zero reaction. And understandably, Frankie is like, what the hell? The Chapapa guy had Iron Body and he's still fucking crumpled when I punched him with this. Why is this not working? And Lucci says, I think he says that he's got 5 times the power as Chapapa guy. I do really enjoy the fact that Frankie called him Chapapa guy. Like, I don't know. I just thank you. Appreciate you. But the fact that like when Frankie punches him and pulls his hand back after Lucci has no reaction, his hand is like sort of black dark for a moment. And I think that's just meant to be like an animation signal, you know, how that it's that language to signal that like his weapon has been rendered impotent for a moment. But I thought that something had happened to like cause it to malfunction, that basically that punch landing and encountering so much resistance meant that it was now like broken and he wouldn't be able to use it again. And I'm pretty sure that's not the case because he doesn't say anything about that. But in the moment I had like, oh no, did Frankie just really fuck himself? So we go then to the main fight of these 2 episodes, which is Kaku and Zorro. And these 2, it is such a weird thing because on the one hand, I do really enjoy the energy of these 2 going head to head because they feel like similar people in a way. There's just a real extreme energy to Kaku, and there has been from the beginning. Like he has this sort of Lucci is the one that feels the most dangerous. Kaku is the one that feels the most disciplined. And that, for me, works with Zorro. Zorro feels like the one that has the most discipline out of our crewmates, even though, you know, I say that and I recognize that he's often just asleep or getting directions wrong. But nevertheless, in terms of what's important to him, his own priorities, he's the most disciplined. So there's something about the 2 of them that makes sense, them fighting against each other. But I did feel like the fight got drawn out a little bit too long in terms of what we get is essentially smack talk, fighting for 3 minutes, a stop, a catching breath, smack talk, a fight, one of them gets really fucking dished, smack talk, fight, another one this time is the one that really gets got, smack talk, breathing, then we go back through it again. And I wanted more either non-stop fighting or more like verbal sparring between the two of them that meant something, because the verbal sparring is basically each of them accusing the other of being boastful and underestimating the other. It's a very repetitive kind of, and the one exception is the weirdness of him extending his like legs, which we'll get to in a moment. But I found myself growing a little bit bored during this fight just because it seemed like I kept being told by one of them, oh, now I'm really going all out. And they kept saying that every time. So you start to not believe them. You know what I mean? Like if every time you begin a new technique, you assure the person, well, this is my best technique. You'll never be able to beat this. But then later you pull out another 3 things that you're calling your best techniques. It starts to just fall flat a little bit. So anyway, of course we have Zorro going through a variety of styles. He starts with 2-sword style, drops to 1-sword style at one point, and then goes to 3-sword style. And I really do like when he takes off his bandana from his arm and ties it around his head. And Kaku is like, does that even make you actually stronger or no? And Zorro is just like, guess you'll have to find out. Who knows? But the fight between Zorro and an actual giraffe, I can't lie, is hilarious. It's just such a weird thing. Zorro is so small in comparison, and it really does feel like he has to have the advantage because he is more lithe and he can move more quickly and easily. But then this giraffe can like use his neck as a sort of whip. And at one point he turns himself into a cube. And when Zorro's in the air, he says something like, you have more weak spots when you're in the air. But when he turns himself into a cube, he's like, I'm a square and I don't have any weak spots at all. And Zorro says, well, what even does that do if you can't move? And he says, well, you forgot, giraffes have 4 legs. And he's just like wildly kicking in the air in front of him. And it turns out what has started is a technique above Zorro's head. And it's like a lot of strikes. And they're coming down at him off the ceiling. And Zorro, he calls it giraffe shower, which is just so not threatening. And Zorro attempts to block them. And it sort of seems like what he does is he redirects a lot of them by blocking back down onto Kaku, who is just using his iron body to keep himself from getting hurt by it. But it is a really weird, like the sequence here. Just Kaku just like as a cube, just waving his legs out in front of him. And then a long sequence of Zorro just standing under a constant shower of blows. It just, it's not super fun. It's not super fun. I'm just saying. So we have a bit of a back and forth about what his name is. And in the sub, it's Giraffe Raff. But then Zorro says Giraffe Boy in the dub. And they go back and forth on that for a little bit. Again, we have the brace yourself, playtime is over, and I'm going to cut through you. And once again, the like challenge here is Zorro going up against the like nose pistol, I think is what it's called. And he manages to block it, but he's trying to actually get a hit on this guy. And he throws Kaku into the wall. So it's not like it doesn't do anything, but he doesn't get the kind of like cut that he wants. And he has a long moment here of just gloating to himself, because the fact that Kaku hit the wall that hard does seem like it's speaking in his favor, but it's not enough. Kaku is just dusting himself off and gets right back up again. So then we cut back to Luffy, and he is using Gum Gun Gatling as Lucci uses what he calls paper art is the technique. I'm not really sure what that does. He's able to just sort of dodge. I don't know why it's called paper art, because it seems like what we've seen the other guys use the technique in order to dodge, I thought was shave. Maybe I'm getting them mixed up, but I don't remember anybody saying paper art, and I couldn't see anything in particular about that made paper art as a name make sense. So I just wanted to ask about that. But yeah, this whole thing is when he gets like attacked by Frankie, and Frankie really thinks he's going to be able to do something, and he doesn't quite manage it. Luffy keeps sort of stepping in and trying to get Frankie to go on ahead. And he, at one point, grabs Luffy by both hands and stops him, and then wraps Lucci in his own arms and legs, like ties him up, basically. And Lucci, he does moonwalk in the air, which I thought was kind of a fun thing, because normally the moonwalk, it's done to like get yourself some loft, but he's like falling, and so he does it in the air as he's falling and slams himself backward into the ground to daze Luffy, basically, and get him to release him. And I thought that was a pretty smart technique, just doing the whole thing backwards, because I'm used to seeing that, and that being a way that you sort of get out of a fight is you just, launch yourself into the air, but launching yourself into the ground, that's pretty good. Sorry, Gus is talking with Kaku. He just got his devil fruit like an hour ago, so him saying time is a bit silly. It's his best technique. Oh, some autocorrect happened there. Because they flutter like a piece of paper. It's not really used as much as the other powers. Shave is super speed. Moonwalk is jumping in the air. He didn't flutter, though. Like, just... If you go back and watch that spot, Gus, when he says paper art, he literally just does this. He just like tips from side to side, what seems to be pretty slowly. And I know it's supposed to be that he's doing it fast, and that's how he's avoiding the Gatling, but it doesn't look it. It's very metronome-y. Demian says, Shave is moving real fast. Paper art is then swaying like a piece of paper in the wind to dodge. Oh. Okay. Saying sway gives me a different impression than flutter. I guess that I could buy that. It just feels like a weird... Moonwalk even makes sense because, like the sky, the moon, okay, fine. Shave, close shave, like I think of close shave as meaning like you almost got somebody, so moving real fast works for me. Paper art just feels like a weird name. I always thought of it as them making themselves as light and flexible as paper to get pushed out of the way by the air pulled along with their punches. Oh, I see what you mean, Demian. So it's not like he is himself dodging. It's like he's letting the backdraft of Luffy's punches move him out of the way. That's cool. Okay. Yeah. I see what you're saying there. Okay, I accept that. That works for me. But yeah, so then we have Kaku coming at Frankie, trying to do finger pistol. Luffy once again stepping in and stopping him. And Luffy at this point is just like Frankie, literally, what the fuck? Will you please get a fucking move on? Robin is about to get pulled through those gates. I have told you several times now that if she goes through there, we do not get to see her again. So can you get your ass in gear, please, sir, and just do your goddamn job? You have one thing that I'm asking of you, and that is to not fight this man and to go through the doors. Thank you. And for the record, by the end of these 2 episodes, I'm not even positive that Frankie has done that. I think he might still be in that same courtyard, but I may be wrong. We'll get back to that. So then we have the attack with again, trying to do nose pistol. His neck is wholly unguarded, and Zorro tries to hit him in what he thinks is a weak spot, gets kicked a billion times, manages to block them. And then this cracks me up. He tries to use Giraffe cannon. And this is when he attempted to, he pulls his neck in and it makes his legs grow. And he kind of says, "Oh, dang it. I pulled my neck in too far and it made my legs grow." And rightfully in the dub, Zorro just says, "What the hell? What kind of weird body do you have?" And he says it's like when you cram dough through small holes and it comes out as noodles, like a pasta machine. And there's a long pause. And then he just says, "Pasta machine!" and starts to attack him again. This is the one exception to me kind of feeling a little bit let down by this fight, is the pasta machine joke. Like, I truly was laughing so hard. It is such a weird thing. Like, first of all, the comparison that he's making, it's like when you put dough through a pasta machine. That's not, like, what even do you mean by that? I think that what he's trying to say is, like, his neck, like, shoved his legs out the back, basically. Like, there's only so much room inside his body, but that's not really what, the pasta machine would do. The whole thing, like, really doesn't make sense, really. But it doesn't matter that much because it's all so fucking bizarre anyway. And, like, I like that he is just figuring out his own shit. He doesn't understand a lot of his, like, fighting technique yet as a giraffe either. So we get him being a bit caught off guard when shit doesn't go right. But then we also have Zorro, who is saying, like, "Hey, dude, what the fuck? What is this?" Like, Zorro, at one point he says something like, "Watch the majesty of nature." And then he does some weird shit. And Zorro, rightfully, again, is like, "That is not natural." I was like, "Thank you, sir." Because he's saying, like, the majesty of nature as he forms himself into perfect squares and right angles. And, like, there's practically the sound of gears turning and shit. It's just super not natural. So yeah, this is a part where Zorro says, again, enough is enough. You know, like, reiterating, just, they keep doing this sort of like, okay, now it ends here. And he does a dragon attack, I think is what he calls it. But it does, like, it's strong enough to sort of make Kaku back off for a moment and be a little bit panicked, but it doesn't actually take him down. He uses Moonwalk, goes straight up through the hole in the ceiling that he's made, and then comes back down on Zorro again. And they're basically, like, in the middle of this fight when the episode ends. So when we start the next one, we're pretty much in the same place that we started at the previous episode, it feels like. Do you know what I mean? Because they're still in the same courtyard, facing off across from each other at the same distance. And even though I know a fight has happened, no material progress has really been made. It doesn't feel like. So when this episode started, I did kind of feel like I've seen this already. And I was starting to get a little bit impatient with it. But yeah, so he is, finally kind of takes a moment and says something to him about how, like, it looks like you've got more going on than I expected, and you landed a single hit, which is surprising, and I think you must have foreseen my reaction because I don't get got ever. Meanwhile, Zorro is like, did you really think that you were just going to be able to, like, swan out of here? And you can't have fought as much as you probably have and never been hit before by a blade ever. But the way that Kaku responds does sort of sound like it is extremely rare. Like, he really doesn't seem to be that familiar with getting hit at this point. He's, so this is when he uses the throwing stars technique, and while Zorro is in the midst of trying to block all of those coming at him, he does what he is calling Kilimanjaro, but which I have to tell you guys looks exactly the same as Nose Pistol to me. It's like, it looks almost identical. Honestly, this Nose Pistol and Giraffe cannon, they all feel like practically the same thing. And then he starts to just, like, use his head as a mallet and, like, swing down on him like he's like he's a flail. And really, he's coming down on Zorro, like, pretty quick. And as he's doing it, saying things like, oh, really talking a lot of smack for somebody who's getting his ass beat. And then says Fury Slash and comes at him with the side of the blade like he's going to deliver the final blow. And Zorro manages to block him here. And then we get an honestly hilarious attack. Like, because a lot of the way this is animated, it's like a series of close-ups and stuff that causes you to sort of forget exactly what they look like in comparison to each other. So you are constantly reminded that, yes, Zorro is much smaller than he is. And yes, he's got this long neck and this other, like, he's got his weird advantages. But this attack is the first time that I feel like the camera pulls all the way back and you just see that this is a regular sized man sword fighting a giant giraffe. And that shit is hysterical. It's just really funny. And he's like, the giraffe is like chasing him as he goes like backward, and his little legs are moving really quick. Like, the whole thing is just so, it's just really funny. That's the only thing I can say. And as he's coming at Zorro, he's doing his usual, like, you're only pirates and you come here. And basically it's like you come into my house and it's like, you're going to have to die. And as he says that, and just like that woman, all of a sudden there's that, like, sort of black flame effect. And Zorro puts his foot down and catches, it's like he couldn't find purchase for a second and he was getting slid backward. And then all of a sudden it seems like he gains purchase, is able to come to a stop, and all of these, like, black flickering, almost smoke-like flames come out, and he manages to stop the giraffe in his tracks. And the giraffe, for his part, is kind of like, what the hell was that? He just looked like a demon for a minute. And he says he looks like a god with 6 faces and 6 arms. So what I had taken to be flames or smoke or something is like the very beginnings of like other sword blades that are sort of manifesting in the air. It's a weird thing, and we'll see it more definitively in a moment. But this is when the giraffe begins to like swing himself around. And I swear to God, he's doing this and it's like ridiculous looking. And as he's doing it, Zorro is literally just standing there. And there's something about him frantically spinning on the spot and the wind of it blowing Zorro's clothing back and everything. It just feels so silly. So this is when Zorro says Demon 9-Sword Aura. And we see him like manifest these other arms. And it's supposed, the way that the giraffe says, he says, how does he manifest? How he can show such a powerful illusion with his fighting spirit. And I'll tell you what, kiddos, those of you who are Cradle fans, this was very much like the icon to me, touching the icon. That is what this felt like. So I think that might be where Mr. Will White got the idea for this, or maybe something else, but it feels like he is connecting with a god of sword fighting or something and managing to get power through that. So when the giraffe does this six slicer, or sky slicer is the way he says it in the dub, I think, attack, and it heads for Zorro is picturing all of the people that he wanted to save, all of the people that mean something to him and what it is that he's actually fighting for. And he manages to like completely dissipate the attack in midair and turn it into mist and then soars through it. And he says, I choose to walk the path of the Asura as he is coming at Giraffe Boy, which he does not like to be called. And I don't know if the word Asura has come up before, but I don't recall. So if anybody wants to refresh me, that would be great. And of course, it's Asura Silver Mist is what he calls this attack. And it is enough to really bring down this giraffe quite hard. This dude's eyes are whited out, the universal signal for I'm dead, but not really. And he turns back into Kaku, regular little Kaku. And I kind of enjoy the fact that he transforms back into himself because I'll be honest, I sort of forgot that he is like, that this isn't his regular form. And there's something really anticlimactic about him turning into a regular person again as he collapses. You know, it reminds me of at the end of Harry Potter in the books. In the movies, they do this big dramatic, like he dissipates into a bunch of dust and actually just disappears into the air as if he is sort of like floating into pieces like ash. And it was always a bit of a bummer to me that they chose to do it that way, because in the book, he gets killed and falls and is like an ordinary dead body. And there is something about the ordinariness of his death that takes the magic and fearsomeness out of him and brings it back from a person who was practically legendary to, oh, but he was just a guy, like just a really fucked up guy. And in the movie, the way they chose to do it really kept him as this sort of godlike figure, which I feel like missed the point. And, you know, they always are going to do the thing that's a little bit more like, I was going to say picturesque. That's not the word I want. Cinematic isn't even really the word I want, but just like melodramatic, really. It's the same thing that they did with a lot of Game of Thrones stuff where like the whole thing was that it didn't end a certain way. But in the show, they made it end that way because they just couldn't fucking resist. And anyway, I really do like that when he collapses here, he's just a fucking dude, because the wolf guy that Sanji took down, he's still like wolfy. As far as I noticed, like when Sanji walks away from him, it's a big furry body that he's walking away from. So it's not like this always happens. And I don't know if it's happening to him because he's new to this and he doesn't know how to maintain it when he gets knocked out or what. But I just thought that it was sort of cool. So, okay, thank you. Gus says Asuras are a type of Buddhist god. Okay, cool. So let's see, where do we go from here? Oh, okay, right. So we have the memories of Kaku and him like flying over the city, and Zorro thinking to himself about what it was that Paulie said. He, reminder, was feeling very betrayed at the fact that all these dudes were CP9 agents and he thought that they were friends. And he turns to Kaku and says, there's a message I've got from Paulie, and that is, you're fired. And it was actually kind of funny because Kaku says, man, I'm just an assassin. What other kind of job am I going to get? And Zorro says, well, you could join a zoo. And Kaku actually does smile. And in the sub, he says, hey, be nice. There was something about the sort of like mildness of this exchange that I found genuinely adorable. And he just pulls that key out of his sash and drops it on the ground. And I was a little bit worried that this was going to turn out to be a lure, that he was going to be doing the same thing that Wolfie did to Usopp earlier. But it doesn't seem like that's the case. It's just a regular, I'm defeated, here's your prize kind of moment. So, all right. Then we have Sanji, who shows up and is just like, well. Sanji is coming up in... I think that I've decided, out of everybody, Sanji is the one that I'm most interested in what his reaction to things are going to be. And Chopper is the one that I am the most invested in keeping safe. So whenever Sanji turns up, I always find myself getting very interested, because as much as I get irritated with his reaction to literally any female presence usually, I think that I just kind of relate to him in so many ways that I see him as a tiny bit of a self-insert character for me. So I realize that my antenna tunes in a lot more when he turns up. Gus says, my headcanon is that you revert to the form you're most comfortable in, since Chopper reverts to his hybrid form instead of his deer form when he gets knocked out. Interesting. Yeah. Well, but the thing is that when he gets pulled out of the water, he's in his deer form. So I kind of saw it as his hybrid form was just him on the way to transforming all the way back to deer form. But I don't know. That's an interesting theory, though. So we have all of the Frankie pirates who are on the backs of those poor knocked out sea bulls. What are they called? And those guys are being carried by the giants. And there's just something about all of these dudes working together that I think is adorable and I really enjoy. And I kind of want these giant sea monsters to become friends with the giants and be buddies. I understand the Frankie pirates have a special relationship with them and all that, and that's fine. But I don't know. I feel like the Frankie pirates have been... They're using them more as a work animal. And I feel like because of the size comparatively with the giants, that looks like more of an owner-pet relationship, which I would like for them because they're so cute. And I wouldn't mind it for them to have a slightly less demanding life and one that's more fun and adorable. And maybe they get to play with toys and get treats and snacks. That's all I'm saying. So, back to the Bridge of Hesitation for a minute. Just wanted to mention that it winds up going down here because it's been a very long drawn out process of the bridge connecting, and once again grabbing by the hair, yada yada yada, Frankie fighting Lucci, the punch, nothing happening, him being startled, and then as Lucci gets the better of Frankie for a moment and it looks like he's going to deliver the killing blow, Luffy jumps in with his weird hot water bottle thing and launches Luffy across the room and then says second gear. And it's the first time he's used the second gear against Lucci, I should mention. You know, we saw him use it on Bluno, and then that's it. I think we haven't seen it since then. He only did that thing where he like exploded that wall out, but he turned real little for a minute. And I have to mention that there's this moment here where Lucci is getting up out of the rubble, and he seems to be almost smiling to himself. And Luffy is, you know what? I'm just going to share this for a second. But he looks so Dragon Ball-y to me. Do you guys see what I'm saying? I am not a Dragon Ball fan. Just like for the record, I have never watched a single episode. But I know what the fuck these guys look like. And this looked like this to me. That's what he looked like. And it just, I think what caught me off guard is that he doesn't have his hat on here. And I don't know. I think it's just on the string around his neck. But I just thought it was sort of interesting how I have gotten used to him with the hat, even in the midst of fights. And that when his hair is like this, he just looks like a completely different person. Because I have joked before about feeling like a lot of anime, it's just the same face with different wigs on, which we know is pretty much how Oda operates in terms of female character drawing. But this really kind of made it stand out to me that like Luffy's face isn't particularly distinctive. It's really like his entire look that if we just take his face, not particularly distinctive to me. So yeah, this is when Frankie again says, I don't know what you're doing, but I can finish him off. But again, he is not aware of what he's dealing with. So he turns to Lucci, and then he sees that Lucci has transformed into this fucking leopard thing and is totally taken off guard and is just like, well, what the hell? And is watching, standing stock still, as Lucci comes sailing through the air toward him, and Luffy has to intervene, hopping through the air and slamming him in the head with a leg. And I just really want Frankie to fucking listen to Luffy and send him flying, please. Stop trying to deal with this dude and go through the doors. Run. Fly, you fool. Let's see. Gus says, I'm pretty sure it's the same studio too. I'm not sure though. And yeah, Gear Second is a very Dragon Ball style power up too, visually. Okay. Noted. So this is when Lucci starts to talk smack and be like, don't you remember that this attack that I'm about to do is the one that I was able to lay you out in a single blow last time? And I just always have to compare the dub and the sub and the way that things are, you know, because sometimes the sub is better, but mostly I've been liking the dub better. So when he says this, Lucci just says, oh, or Luffy, sorry, says, oh, that, which I really like that start. Oh, that is so dismissive and just like, oh, are you still hung up on that? And in the sub, he says, I got better after I ate meat, which just doesn't really pack the same punch. In the dub, he says, oh, right, well, but I was kind of hungry when you did that. Which I feel like is a really different energy. I got better after I ate meat implies that didn't do the damage you thought it did, and I recovered really easily. I was kind of hungry, though, implies I couldn't handle it because I was on an empty stomach, and I'm not this time. And that's a totally different feel. So, again, dub coming out superior on that line. And he launches himself forward to attack Luffy. Luffy uses Jet Bazooka this time. And we don't really get detail on this attack. He's just suddenly in the air behind Lucci. It's like very, very sudden. And it it doesn't seem like it took a lot for him to like become airborne this way. And the only thing that we really see is the fists coming out as he says jet bazooka, like his arms have motion to them. And then we see Lucci go sliding, but we don't actually see the connection of Luffy's fists on Lucci's body, or how many times he hit him, or anything like specific about it. It's just the launch of the attack and then Lucci hitting the wall. So they're still kind of masking whatever it is that Luffy is doing with this second gear attack. And I just really want to know what it is. Like, you know, I'm assuming that the jet, what was it? Jet Gatling? I already forgot. But it's the power of like whatever the steam is that he's got built up somehow. And finally, okay, so I was saying I couldn't remember if Frankie actually takes off. He does finally here after Luffy does the second gear attack again, and he manages to like get past and run through the door. And we cut real briefly back to Robin with her teeth latched on the edge of the bridge. And then we end the episode with Luffy facing off against Lucci, who's getting back to his feet. That hit clearly like surprised him, but he still seems pretty much fine. It doesn't seem like that did any particular damage. It's just more of like the shock that he was able to withstand anything and continue fighting. So that's the end of the episode. But yeah, so like these were fun. I just feel like enough already. You know what I'm saying? Like, I really hope that we've wrapped most of it up and that we can just get to the Buster Call part now. All I want is to deal with that and figure out what the hell's going on. We've got all of our guys who have their like the two giants with their big the sea monsters that have all of the Frankie pirates on it. And I'm like, all right, well, we're on basically an island. Maybe we can use those guys to escape. I don't know how that would work, but I'm just trying to figure out how our friends can get out of this one. The thing that's bothering me is that all of that water, granted, you've got sea monsters that you can like jump on their backs into water, but it all is pouring down into this one hole that's basically looking like a bottomless pit right now. I have to assume it's not actually bottomless and that there's something going on down there. But I mean, it doesn't, nobody talks about that. So I'm going to assume if there is something down there, that's not something that most people are aware of. You know, it's just so weird because the way this world works, like we had Skypiea, we had a whole kingdom in the air, essentially. Is there a whole kingdom under the sea? What would that even, how would that even work? You know, what would that look like? Yeah, very, very, very curious about how they're getting out of this. So I'm going to wrap up, but thank you guys so much for hanging out with me. I really appreciate you all. Thank you, Bernadette, for commissioning this episode, and I'll be seeing you again soon with a new one. Until then, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.